Does that make some sense? We tell them they need to bake with their children, but do we tell them that's because they're developing the gross motor muscles they need for writing and the fine motor muscles? We tell them they need to do it, but we need to close the circle. You need to close that gap. And I think we've got a systemic problem. And I was saying to Esther before, when I looked for pictures of systems, all I found were pictures of white men sitting around boardrooms. So, yeah, get checkers. How can we better support all of our children, not just the children that the system is set up for? And we have some systemic problems, as Esther's already pointed out. Teachers are not well trained to deal with parents. I will say that my university is beginning to train teachers. They will be well trained to deal with parents. Involved parents are often unrepresentative of the parent body. And I'll come back to this culture of poverty discourse we have. But we know that the gaps between children from different backgrounds are increasing across Europe. And also they're increasing in industrializing countries. So the more children you get into a system, the wider the gap appears to be. But this seems to be the fact that the gap is showing up, not necessarily that it's getting wider. But it also seems to be that as skills become more important, parents put more emphasis on them, but parents need to know that those skills will be important. Does that make some sense? So the gap is not getting narrower, the gap is getting wider. And parental involvement shows us how parents can support their children to achieve in the best way they can. But we know that a lot of parents lack the self-efficacy. And if you are parents yourself, you know when your child is 4 or 5 years old, they ask you questions, and for the most part you can answer them. Although my son started school by saying, "Miss, how does the electricity get from the light switch to the light? Because my mummy doesn't know." And I just sort of said, "I'll be back at 3, have a good time." But as your children age, you become less and less able to answer their questions. And many parents begin to switch off helping with schoolwork in secondary school because they don't understand what's going on. But the research is very clear. What they should be helping with is not the schoolwork. What they should be helping with is self-efficacy and self-belief. So rather than saying, "Oh, the answer to that quadratic equation is," what we need to support parents to say is, "Wow, that's really impressive. You can do that. Excellent. I'm really proud of you." It's not about understanding the content. It's about the child's self-efficacy. We need to support all of our students, not just the favored few whose parents did well in the system. And if we don't, we could be making the gap wider rather than narrower. And I'm not willing to support that. I'm not willing to do something that disenfranchises our most disenfranchised children. One of my doctoral students asked me a couple of years ago, and you need to follow this, are you willing to disadvantage the advantaged to advantage the disadvantaged? In other words, am I willing to get in the way of children who have all of the good stuff going for them to support the children who aren't? No, I'm not. Because the children aren't the ones that cause that advantage. I am, however, willing to do everything I can to support the children facing disadvantage. This is from a book called Swing Time by Zadie Smith. And it's about how her mother and her mother's friends felt about Parents' Evening. And I hope you'll forgive me if I read a little bit to you, because I think this is one of the most powerful ways of understanding how some parents feel. We knew that our mothers in their own time had feared school. They feared the arbitrary rules and felt shamed by them, and I think that's an incredibly important phrase. By the new uniforms they couldn't afford, the baffling obsession with quiet, the incessant correcting of their original patois Cockney, the sense they could never do anything right anyway. How many of us really, really just want to be told that we're doing the right thing? How many of us really want to be good boys and girls? That's what we're after. They had a deep anxiety about being told off. That fear never really left our mothers. Parents' Evening in their minds was not so different from detention. It remained a place where they might be shamed. The difference was they now they were grown and they didn't have to go. I find that incredibly powerful. And particularly for many of us who didn't have that experience of the education system, for people that had a good experience of the education system, it's important they know that not everybody did. And that one of the reasons some of the parents may never come into school is that they're physically unable to because of their own experience. There are some real barriers to engagement, and this is one of them: parents' experience of education, parents' self-belief, self-efficacy. But there are also some practical issues. Parents are incredibly busy people. And particularly parents facing socioeconomic difficulty working 2 or 3 jobs. This is not about people sitting around not working. The largest growing group of people in poverty are people who are in work. Childcare, transport, cost. So some of the questions that I often ask schools is, when does the last bus leave your school? Who gets the furthest parent home? And it's amazing how rarely schools can answer that. Every so often somebody will pull out a bus schedule and go, right, we know, we've looked. But most of the time they don't know. Well, how can you plan an evening event if your parents can't get home? And what does it say if you haven't even checked that? When do your parents celebrate religious feasts? In England, we're very unlikely to have Parents' Evening on Good Friday, but we might have it on Purim, we might have it on Eid. You know, how are we thinking about our parents? And how many of our parents work shifts? And what shifts do they work? If I'm saying to a mother, no, you must come in on Monday, and that means mum doesn't work a shift on Monday, that means mum doesn't eat that week. Is that actually what I'm saying? Is there really no other time I can do that? Right. We know all of this, and we've known it all for 25, 50 years. Hoover Dempsey did work ages ago. Joyce Epstein has been doing work on this for 25 years. We know all of this. So why haven't we sorted out the problem? And I think one of the reasons we haven't sorted out the problem, and I say this to the researchers in the room, is that I think we're part of the problem. I certainly am. I know some of my early work bought into some of the things I really don't want you to buy into. And the first one is culture of poverty, which is an idea that it relies on the idea that all people who experience poverty are the same. And it was published about 50 years ago, and about 49 years ago, and 11 months, a bunch of researchers said, no, that doesn't work. It's been rejected by scholars, but it is loved by policymakers. And if you want a perfect example of this, there's a document that came out called After the Riots, about the English riots in 2012, and it basically blames parents, and says parents aren't good enough. It sees poverty as personal. If you are poor, it's because you have chosen to be poor. So I'm going to move on, if I can get it to move on. So your motivational themes, and if you see these in schools, please tear them down. Just choose to succeed. You always have a choice. I grabbed these off the internet in 5 minutes searching. Poverty draws a line, choose to step over it. I find that deeply offensive. So you are in insecure housing, you don't have enough to eat, you can't keep your children warm, but just decide to be happy, and you'll be happy. Right? You can do it. Can you see what's going on here? It's a personalization of poverty. It's a personalization of problematic parenting. And it relies on saying those people are not like us. And this is a quote from one of our ex-prime ministers, the group of which is rapidly growing. But what David Cameron said is, what matters most to a child's life chances is not the wealth of their upbringing, but the warmth of their parenting. So if you don't succeed, it's because your mom didn't love you enough. Not because the system is rigged against people in poverty. Can you see what I'm saying about the systemic issue? But we buy into these things. So we need to change the discourse. And that's why this was called the educational in debt. We need to stop talking about an achievement gap and start talking about an educational debt. You do not have an achievement gap. There is a debt I owe you. As a system, we owe all of our children a reasonable education. We need to move and change that. Changes the emphasis. And we need to use the right terms. And I'm very pleased to hear all of the work about informal education, because the word learning starts at birth or beforehand. Education is learning with rules. So dance classes, sports classes, that's education. Schooling's 17 to 25% of a child's life. Learning is much larger. We need to have parental engagement in learning. So we need to stop concentrating on schools and start concentrating on learning. We need to get rid of phrases like hard to reach parents. Who's hard to reach? Usually it's the school, not the parent. Schools in England all have a school improvement plan. Do the schools that you work with have a school improvement plan? Why? And this gets me in so much trouble. You don't want to improve the school. You want a learning improvement plan, not a school improvement plan. The school exists for learning, not for itself. But we have lost sight of that. Some suggestions. Every meeting in every school, in every informal group, whatever, starts and ends with, what does this have to do with learning? And if it doesn't, stop talking about it, because you exist for learning. Look at all the stuff that goes home from schools. How much of it has to do with learning? Very little of it. Don't send the rest home. What are schools or other groups doing that doesn't relate to learning if their major focus is learning? Can you see what I'm getting at here? It's about going back to what we're for and what we're about, which is supporting parents. And the message we want to get to parents is that what matters is that they care about their children and their learning. It does not matter if they can't help with the homework. As a matter of fact, the older the children get, the more counterindicated that is. It's about saying to a child, I don't know what you're doing, would you like a cup of tea? I'm proud of you for doing your homework. I believe in you. If you've got a question, we will find the answer. Parents don't need to know the answers. They need to care that the answers get found. And we said this a number of years ago, but I still believe it. Parental engagement needs to be at the center rather than the periphery of everything that providers do. And if you've got school policies, go and look at them. Where are parents mentioned in the teaching and learning policy? If they're not at the center of it, it's not going to work. You may have seen this. This is in the Creative Commons. You can use this. And in the first one, we have equality. Everybody's got the same size box. In the second one, we've got equity. People have the box that they need for what they're doing. And if you are my height, you spend a great deal of time in supermarkets asking tall people to get stuff down off shelves for you. My son tends to come down and say, would you like me to do tall things for you? I don't want that system. It's much better than the first system, but this is what I want. I want a system where nobody needs a box. Does that make some sense? This is where I'm going. The systemic problem has been removed. So there are some suggestions. I'm not putting that up there because my publisher says I have to. I am putting it up there. But because if you go to the publisher's website for that, you have access to online resources. You don't have to buy the book for the online resources. You can contact me. That is my email address. If you follow me on Twitter, as Esther does, that's who I am on Twitter. You will find out that I have a cat and I knit. That's an incredibly long URL for my work in Swansea. Just search Janet Goodall Swansea, please, because otherwise you'll be here forever trying to write that down. There's an online toolkit. Again, drop me an email. I will send you the link. That's for schools to figure out what will work for them. It doesn't say, this is what you need to do. It says, this is what you need to think about. What we need is targeted, responsive, culturally appropriate support for parental engagement and learning. This designed in conjunction with staff, parents, kids, young people, and researchers, implemented in partnership with families, and evaluated effectively. And I could be here for another half hour, 3/4 of an hour, talking about evaluation. Parental engagement with children is the best lever we have for raising achievement for all of our children, for making sure all of our children have the best possible outcomes. There are a couple of more resources I would recommend to you. One is the cost of a school day, just by the Child Poverty Action Group in Scotland. It is fascinating. If you do the work that the second group has done, Poverty Proofing the School, you will find out that children as young as 7 or 8 are staying home from school on days that there's an extra cost, because they know mom doesn't have the extra pound for non-uniform day or on sock day or whatever. That shouldn't be happening in our schools. That shouldn't be an issue in our schools. We need to continue to ask challenging questions. We need to continue to push back. This is not going to happen with well-behaved people. The only way systemic change happens is unrest and dissidence. And if you have not read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, please go home and read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, because this is a call to conscientization. We need to rise, continue, and be. We need to actually believe we can make a difference, because the young people are counting on us to make a difference. I'm not going to say the journey starts here, because I think the journey has already started. You wouldn't be sitting here if you weren't interested. I keep saying I want to talk to a group of people who have paid not to listen to me, rather than a group of people who've come. This journey is continuing, and it can continue, because this is what we want, and this is the outcome that we want. Thank you very much.